Good morning, everyone that's joining. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Welcome. My name is Darren Carter. I'm the Director of Training for corporate training for the HOA Living family. We're welcoming you. Glad to have you here. And we're just going to wait for a couple of minutes for our last minute attendees to log in. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here.
It was very interesting what I had to say.
Great. I'm interested to find out what we have to say as well, so that'll be good. Okay, we're getting close to 12:05. I want to go ahead and get started so we have enough time to cover all of our topics today. Our topic, welcome to our Association Essentials series. Our job is to educate and help you manage your association. That's what we want to be able to do. We welcome anybody that's possibly from an association we haven't had, anybody that's new to our AES series. We're glad to have you as well. Please feel free to chat, to put questions in the chat. We're having an open panel today that we're going to ask some experts how they do things and how they've done things. We have 67 years of experience between our three panelists today in the HOA field. And so we've got lots of experience for you, lots of great answers, I'm sure, to your questions. We want to get questions from the audience so that we can answer those as well as we go. So please feel free to go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat, and we'll be able to answer those. Upcoming AES sessions, our next one will be April 23rd. We do want to tease that, and it's going to be on insurance. I know that's an issue for a lot of people because of costs and that sort of thing. We're going to have some discussion on insurance for HOAs on the 23rd of April at this same time. 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. We also have access to previous topics there. If you get out your phone, there are a couple of these, I can't remember what they're called, the graphics for you to be able to get to that page that we have in this particular presentation. And if you want to access our previous topics, on our website, you can go to Association Essentials Series on HOALiving.com, and you can see previous AES trainings that we've done, as well as this one will be archived in case you missed something on this. So we'll be having that ready for you as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Our community manager of the month for HOA Living is Nicole Larson. She's part of our Minnesota team, and we're really glad to have her in our company. She was helpful, responsive, professional, and showed a wonderful personality. That's exactly what we love to hear, that one of our managers is doing the right things and being helpful. She's working at Water's Edge in Minnesota, and we're grateful to her for all of her hard work. So we wanted to acknowledge her. Our board member of the month, we always pick a board member of the month, is Sharon Bowman. She is in southern Utah, Green Spring Village and La Jolla Hills. She was dedicated, projects flawlessly executed, love for community, fostering meaningful relationships and inspiring. Great praise for Sharon. Hopefully she's here today and can take our applause and get recognition. So that's our board member of the month as well. You can nominate an outstanding board member by going to either this website here that you have or taking a picture of that code and nominate an outstanding board member. We love to get nominations for outstanding board members, people that are really doing it right. So please feel free to nominate a board member. You can connect with us on social media. We have our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn addresses there. So you can get the community scoop, look at our website portal. You can see our YouTube channel. All of those are available to our guests, and you're welcome to look at those and learn from what we have had in the past, and then keep connected to us with social media. So those are all available as well. Like I said, if you keep your phone out, and we've got lots of these codes for you to be able to take pictures of and go to if you can. So we'll have a few more at the end of the meeting. All right, let's get on to our board topic, or our topic today. It's board meetings, building a better board meeting. So let's talk about our panelists. Our first panelist is Joni Oldroyd. Joni has 17 years of experience, and she's managed 12 unit buildings up to 2,400 unit associations. She is CMCA and AMS certified, and she's working on her PCAM certification as we speak. So we're glad to have her on our team here at FCS, one of our companies under the HOA Living umbrella. And we're really pleased to be able to welcome her to being a panelist today. We have Amy Weiniger. She has 30 years of experience. She spent 6 years as a county commissioner, was the co-chair for the Legal Action Committee for Maryland, and she is PCAM, LSM, CMCA, and AMS certified. So she's got all the certifications you can get in our field. So we're really glad to have her wisdom and expertise on our panel today. And our third panelist is Joe Wise. Joe has 20 years of experience in this industry. He's the owner of Wise Property Solutions. He served as a mayor of Johnson City, Tennessee. He's PCAM, CMCA, and AMS certified, and he served on the CAI, which is the Community Association Institute's National Board of Trustees. So a lot of experience on our panel, a lot of great experience that they can share with you today. So let's get started. I've basically broken down board meetings into 3 basic tips or things that we want to do today. First of all, how do we improve them? Getting tips and tricks from professionals, and then answering all of your questions. And I've broken it down into 3 sections: before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. So we're going to talk first about before the meeting, and what does it mean to get prepared? What is it we need to do in order to communicate correctly through this? And we're going to start that right now with our first question, going to Amy Weiniger. So we're going to start with Amy. Let's talk about agendas, communication, location, and notification of members. But let's start with agendas. Amy, what's been your experience with working with agendas? Have you used them, or have you found that they don't work? Or what kind of things have you used in order to keep the meeting on track?
So the agenda is the guiding star for a meeting, and that is what sets our discussion. That is what builds the meeting. And so to build an agenda, the usual way I do it is I reach out to the board president and the board members several weeks before the meeting and make sure that all of their concerns are reflected somewhere in that agenda. And then after we have built that agenda, that sets my work as a manager to bring to the table the information they need to make good decisions. So the board meeting itself becomes both the end and the new beginning of this process. You're bringing the information that they need to make decisions based on the agenda, and then during that discussion, we're setting the agenda for the next meeting with either things that we need more information about or that build out of that discussion from that board meeting.
Awesome. And we actually had somebody ask a question about agendas that I want to read. Go ahead. I'm not sure who that was. Okay, we have a question. Somebody said, what do we do if our agenda isn't working, if we're not getting through the agenda? Joni, can you take a stab at that question? What do we do if the agenda isn't being followed and that sort of thing? What can we use?
Yeah, I think this is a great place for board members to be able to reel everything in. You can try a timed agenda. So on the agenda, it'll have each of the meeting points, and then you stick to that time. So you want to have a start and an end time for the meeting. And then for each of your items on the agenda, you want to have like time limit on there. And then if it's getting overboard, you can say, okay, thank you for the comments. We will get to that at the next time, or we'll get back to you. Sometimes you get a homeowner during homeowner forum who wants to just go off for an hour, and you just kind of have to say, okay, thank you. We'll take that into advisement. We will get back to you, and just kind of shut it down from there and go to the next person. Or just keep it moving. You want to stay on that timed agenda if you're using a timed agenda.
Great, that's a great tool, using that timed agenda, and sometimes people don't think of that, so they just put together an agenda, and then meetings take 3 hours, and we don't want to have to spend 3 hours probably in a meeting. There are other things we could be doing, binging on Netflix and all sorts of different things, but we want to try and use that timed agenda to make sure we get through the meeting and get all the business done in a timely manner. So that's great. Now, Joe, I'm going to ask you this next question. What's the importance of communication before the meeting between the board, between the manager, between the association members? What's the key here to make sure that things are communicated properly?
Can I add something to the comment just a minute ago?
Yeah,
on the
you
timed
bet.
agenda, I would also suggest evaluate the meetings you're having. Something that I've always done in a meeting is I sit there with the agenda, whether it's a timed agenda or not. And as the meeting is progressing, I'm writing the time it is when we roll from item A to B to C, because sometimes then that allows me to reflect after the meeting. Well, where did we lose 2 hours? Like, what is it? Is it the committee reports? Is it the financial report? Is it the homeowner forum? Because then that may help you further diagnose, like, where is all the time going? As far as the question you asked me, the communication piece, that's central to the preparation. As Amy said, the agenda is sort of the guiding document. If people haven't done the advanced work of communicating in advance of the meeting and are just kind of coming in cold, that's where a lot of time is going to get lost trying to bring people up to speed on what the actionable business before the board is going to be at the actual meeting.
That's a good point, and being prepared, I think, and let me ask you this, Amy. What is a board member's? What's the best preparation for a board member to prepare for before a meeting? What helps them make sure that things run smoothly?
So before a meeting, I think whatever information the manager has provided in the informational packet is key. Read through that, but also I encourage my board and my residents, don't save up. The board meeting is not the time to throw new questions or new agenda items at a manager. We don't have time to prepare an answer. Nothing good happens after 2 hours in a meeting. So what you want is, if you have a question about the information I provided to you a couple of days ahead, call me right then. Send me an email right then, and I will go and find the answer and send it to either the whole board or to you, depending on the nature of the question. But the idea is that when we get to the meeting, we already have enough information to discuss. We don't have a lot of questions left. We have discussion material, but our questions have been answered before when it makes sense, and I have like my file cabinet there and I can look at things that often during a meeting I can't just stand up and say, well, let me go find that report from 3 years ago right now. That's not the time. The time is if you have a question about the agenda item, get it to the group or to me as a manager before the meeting so I can find the right information for you.
Yeah, that's great advice, and you know, we don't want to catch anybody off guard at a meeting. The board member doesn't want to be caught off guard, the manager doesn't, so having that preparation is really key. So thanks for that answer, that's great. I had somebody ask a little bit about what locations work best for board meetings. So what about locations, Joni? What works the best for board type meetings?
Prior to COVID, I think everybody held their meetings in person. Once COVID happened, I think everybody learned how to do virtual meetings. And I think the turnout is so much better with a virtual meeting. Nowadays, you're able to keep the homeowner forum definitely in check that way. If you've got somebody going off, you can just mute them or excuse them from the call. But yeah, having it online, everyone can log in wherever they're at. They don't have to be there physically, and they can still, you know, type in any comments they have in chat and participate wherever they're at.
That's great. Joe, what can you add to what's been said there?
All that's true. I think whether it's Zoom or in person, a professional atmosphere is key to a professional meeting. Not sitting around your living room, not sitting in a social context. I think if you're around a meeting table or at a Zoom, you're positioned in such a way as to be ready to conduct business.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's great. All right, and then notification of members is the last thing that I thought of that might be a good topic to talk about. We didn't have a question on this, but what's required for notification of members? Joe, we'll start with you on this one. What's required and what's the best way to accomplish that?
Unless the governing documents are specific about it or your state's laws, there may not be much required with respect to a board meeting. Now, what's required and what's best practice are not always the same thing. And so I think generally speaking, anytime you can err on the side of candid and transparent communication, you should absolutely do that. And so in our context, we begin working to prepare meetings 21 days before the meeting as far as soliciting agenda items and other business in an effort to be in a position to publish and distribute that agenda or agenda packet 7 days before the meeting so that people and homeowners and board members alike have opportunity to come to the meeting prepared.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good point. So you got to look at those governing documents. That's really key. You may have requirements, you may not. You may only have requirements, say, for annual meetings or things like that. But having a knowledge of those governing documents for that information is really key. Joni, what are your thoughts about governing documents and board members and reading those, making sure that they've looked through those?
I think education is very important from a manager to a board, and making sure that the board understands their governing documents and what they say. So I think when I get a new board, I do a training with them where we go through like all of the high points of the governing documents, your rules and regulations, definitely your bylaws. That's going to tell you how you have to run the meeting, get your quorum and everything like that. So it's very important to make sure that they're educated on that and then be aware of it and stick to those. I think also with preparing for a board meeting is the board packet that the manager sends out. It's important to make sure that your manager is including all of the items that they need for the board packet so that they can have all of the info prior to the meeting so that they're ready to make those decisions. Otherwise, you kind of get stuck where, you know, one of the board members hasn't gotten into it and then they're trying to go through and like figure out what their decision is going to be or their vote's going to be for it. So making sure that you have all the relevant information for the board members to make those decisions at a board meeting is also very helpful.
Great. Amy, I'm going to give you last word on this before the meeting. Is there anything we missed that you think is really important?
I think with regard to notification of members, one thing I like to do at the end of every year, looking forward to the next year, is to develop a meeting calendar and post that so that everyone is on the same page with when we plan to meet. And maybe that's not going to work out. Maybe we have to cancel or postpone a meeting because of something that happens. But in the meantime, we all understand that there's going to be a meeting every fourth month at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something, and that gets posted on a calendar that the members can access, so they always know what the schedule is probably going to be for interacting with the board in a meeting if they need to, or understanding when actions might happen.
And I would add to that, we've built that into our agenda as one of the final sections underneath adjournment as the future meeting dates. And we run a 12-month rolling schedule. Now, again, as Amy said, things sometimes come up and they have to change. But if you always meet on the third Tuesday of this sequence of months, it's not a mystery when the meeting in 2026 is going to be. Let's go ahead and write it down so we all are clear about what's going to happen and we aren't left scrambling.
That's a great tip. That's really good.
I also
All right, let's move on to the next slide and some of the questions that talk about during the meeting. So during the meeting, homeowner forum already came up, and somebody asked, how long should homeowner forum be, and how do we control it when it's not going well? We had a couple of comments on that, but give us your best case scenario on how to manage homeowner forum. Amy, go ahead.
Well, having been there, done that, the biggest thing I have to say on that, and I've had some homeowner forums that did result in police calls, right? So everybody's been there. We've had some of those homeowner forums where fisticuffs are imminent, and that's not pleasant. But again, my message to residents is always, if you have a question, call me before the meeting. Let me know your concerns before the meeting so I can be prepared and the board can be prepared. It's not your question and your concern is not going to be a secret from the board. We're going to let them know. And sometimes it's as if residents don't trust us to properly convey their concern. But I find that it is helpful to communicate with residents that they don't have to save up to the meeting. Call me in between. I'll make sure the board is aware of your concerns so we can reach some sort of a conversation about that. And try to not divert it from homeowner forum, but make sure that homeowner forum is productive and not just a screeching session. So the homeowner forum is a time for residents to be heard. It's not necessarily a time for them to get answers. So we also try to communicate that to residents ahead of time. If you feel like you need to come and tell the board something, but just remember that this will be the first time they've heard it unless you give me that information ahead of time. So they're not going to have great answers. Putting them on the spot isn't helpful. If you want to be productive during a meeting, and this is what I tell my residents, you let me know ahead of time, you let me add it to the agenda, or you let me prepare the board and give them the information that they need. So trying to direct residents to help us solve the problems through the whole month or two between meetings. And the next thing is that we do typically have a time limit on how long a resident can present their concerns. We ask them to put them in writing so that if you have 5 pages of written problems, we'll get that in writing, and then you have your 1.5 or 2 minutes of discussion. But it isn't really a discussion. The board's not prepared to respond. This is your time to tell them things and for them to take it under advisement. So it's two minutes per homeowner with an overall limit of about half an hour. Again, nothing good happens after a meeting that's 2 hours because people get too tired. And that's even if they're meeting first thing in the morning, they're too tired.
The board shouldn't be engaging homeowners during the homeowner forum, period.
No, they should not. They should not. This is a time for
Because
the homeowners to say.
you're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to speak too quickly. You're going to speak about something with incomplete information. We do 2 things with homeowner forums. We've put them at the end of the agenda, so the old and new business has already been dealt with. Because what I observed using that method I talked about earlier, I had one client that would spend 1 hour and 15 minutes with their front-loaded owner forum and then wonder why their meeting went for 3 hours. And it's like, well, here's where your meeting went for 3 hours. Why don't we just flip that? Because what we were also discovering is a lot of what the homeowner forum was addressing was stuff that if they had just waited for the meeting to happen, they would realize it was an item of business on the agenda and it was actually going to get acted upon. And so our homeowner forum is at the bottom. And it includes this language. I pulled it up. It says the homeowners forum is an opportunity for owners to bring to the board specific comments pertaining to the association's governance. Requests for service, general inquiry, new business items shouldn't be raised in this context. Please share them with the management in advance so they can be put on a future meeting agenda. And we have found that has very much helped manage homeowner expectations so that they're being directed as to how to get their information in front of the board constructively.
Yeah, I'm hearing a theme there of managing expectations ahead of time. And that's really key is people knowing what it's for, why it's there, that sort of thing. And that's kind of the board has to educate the members sometimes on how to do that, how that works. And that can be a process, but I think managing expectations is really what we're talking about there. That's great. We had a question on how often should we meet? So meeting necessity on this list that I've got. How often should we meet in this particular situation? Joni, what are your thoughts on that? And how often should people be meeting for board meetings?
So I would again check your bylaws and see if there's something specific that your bylaws state for your particular association. Otherwise, it's going to be when the board is needing to meet, usually quarterly. If there's a lot going on, then they may want to meet monthly, but it's going to kind of go with your association's need. Now, if you have monthly board meetings scheduled and you don't have business at every meeting, then you wouldn't have a board meeting because the board meeting's purpose is to conduct business. So if you don't have any business, you wouldn't hold a meeting. So it kind of depends on what the association's needs are at the time.
Awesome. What about, we talked about the agenda, and that kind of goes into meeting efficiency, getting through the items of business that need to be done. And we talked about that. I'm going to read this question verbatim because I think it's a really good question, and it sort of fits in this during the meeting thing. I'm going to leave the person anonymous, but let me read this. How can members help rein in a couple of board members who have their own ideas as to what is best for members? Ideas members don't want. Is the only resource members filing a claim against those board members or mounting a petition for a special member meeting to remove them? Both options can cause a lot of contention in the board and with the community. Joe, let's have you talk about this first.
Okay.
That's a big subject.
Well, thank you, Darren. That sounds like there's a lot to unpack in that question. And so I'm going to maybe step back because I don't know how to address the specifics because it sounds like there's some undercurrents there I can't possibly understand. But I think what I would say is remember parliamentary procedure, whether you follow it rigidly or you follow it just sort of in a more informal sense, is there to allow the majority to rule while respecting the rights of the minority. And so in the context of that meeting, if you have people that are espousing views that do not enjoy widespread support, there is a process through which the minority is respected. We heard what you had to say, but then you also need to move it along. Like, the horse is dead, stop beating it. Like you've made your point, and it may be time to call the question. It may be time to say, well, that's not on our agenda tonight. What we're talking about right now is renewing insurance. I don't know why you're talking about the pool hours, those sorts of things. And that's going to really require some discipline, particularly from the chair, because the chair is really who has the opportunity to kind of keep those guardrails in place.
Right. Joni, what are your thoughts about that question?
Yeah, so I start when I'm doing an agenda, I look at the previous meeting minutes to make sure that nothing's missed from old business from before or new business from before that's now going to be old business on your new agenda. I send it out to the board and say, this is what the agenda looks like. Of course, you've got your approval of meeting minutes, you've got your financial review. But then what do we want to discuss at the meeting? Because you should stick to your agenda and nothing should be on that agenda if you're not planning to discuss it. So being open with the board and making sure that you're communicating well with the board and with the manager to create that agenda. If you're going to be discussing it, it needs to be on the agenda.
Right. And then Amy, kind of addressing specifically, what if you have a couple of board members that maybe aren't in touch with what's going on in the community or want things that they don't want? What are your options?
When a board has people on it who are who are contending with each other, so there's contention on the board, member to member, and also between the board and the residents, that's a really, really tough place to be. That you are hoping that your board can be more united in in how they present themselves. And anytime there's an argument about something, it puts everyone at odds. So you want to have a situation where the manager's job is to find common ground. And we're trying to bring the board members together, and we're trying to help them explain a decision that maybe it's a 5-4 vote. Maybe it's a very slim majority that made that decision. But then you have to go and explain it to the residents. So anytime there's contention among the board, that puts managers in a very tricky position. But at the same time, we have to understand the reason we have a board is because they're going to be bringing different life experience, different priorities, different needs to this discussion. And so you're going to be looking at a situation where you're helping them reach a conclusion that can be acceptable to the majority of residents. And the residents have to understand the board is there. They voted those board members on. Maybe now you're not too happy with how those couple of board members are acting, so you're going to have to wait and elect new ones in a couple of years. Be more active. Encourage residents to let their concerns be known in writing ahead of time so that we can convey them to the board productively, so that when we get to a board meeting and there is a division of opinion, it doesn't have to end up in a fist fight. We can have a productive conversation.
I think another way too, to like, when you've got contention between the board members, like first, the board should be discussing those items prior to the meeting. The goal is to have the board already had those discussions via email or however they want to do it. And when they come to the meeting, they're just making decisions. And when you've got the contention, it makes the board look like they don't really know what they're doing too. It doesn't look like you've got a well-formed like board knowing what they're doing. So when it gets like that, I like to say, okay, is there a motion? Like if they start arguing, is there a motion? And then have someone say, okay, I motion to do this. And then the other board members have to vote on that motion. And if it's majority. So if majority passes, it passes and the discussion's over. So it's
I would add to that there are some states that have rules about board member discussion between meetings because it can add to the appearance of non-transparency during a meeting. So we do have to be careful with that the board's discussions don't appear to have been done secretly, that residents have a chance to understand the thinking behind a decision. So I just would be careful when you're asking board members to discuss ahead of time. It's a legitimate question to bring to the manager or the board chair, for more information or more details. But to the extent it is going to be a contentious item, then there might be some board discussion during the meeting to make sure everyone has been heard and their concerns have been addressed. It's a balancing act because we don't want to hijack a meeting with a contentious item, but we also need to make sure that there's transparency and that residents have a chance to understand the different thought processes of the board members.
And sometimes issues appear to be contentious when they're just convoluted. If the question isn't clear, you can sometimes have people feeling like they're at odds with each other. And that's where a good agenda and a clear motion can sometimes be helpful because, if the question is framed so broadly, everybody brings their ideas and unspoken expectations about that question. If the question is just, do we vote to accept the proposal from Acme Enterprises to resurface the pool? Well, now the question is a whole lot clearer, and maybe the only controversy is what color the pool should be refinished, but I see sometimes where meetings will get a little bit dicey, and it's because you have 5 or 6 people sitting around with 5 or 6 individual ideas. So now there's 25 different ideas in play and nobody knows what we're talking about.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, it sounds to me too, like sort of an underlying necessity for board members is some emotional intelligence and keeping your emotions in check. Because if it gets contentious, if it gets angry, it deteriorates so quickly. So I think that's one thing that board members can kind of think about. How are my emotions during the meeting, and you know, what can I rein in as far as the anger or the feeling hurt or feeling those kinds of things. So I think that emotional intelligence is a key point as well. Um, I want to ask while we're here in this during the meeting, we'll start with Joe on this one. But what's sort of your experience? What's your worst board meeting experience, and what did you learn from it? What came to be knowledge from that sort of bad situation?
Well, wish someone else had gone first.
We can have Joni go first. Let's
Please,
have Joni
please,
go first.
give me a minute to think. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Joni.
So I had a meeting where we had to do a budget increase. This association had a 5% cap on their governing document. So every year they couldn't raise their assessments more than 5%. And we had after years and years of this happening, they were severely underfunded. They weren't able, they had deferred maintenance like crazy. And it was just very necessary to raise it like 20%. And so we had to have a homeowner meeting to educate the homeowners of what was going on and why. And we had probably 120 people show up. Everybody and their mother came. And a lot of yelling from the homeowners to us. And, you know, we just kind of have to be prepared and understand why we're asking for this to be raised. And it gave me a chance to educate them on the reserve study and the importance of the reserve study and the importance of funding your association. And then pointing out all of the deferred maintenance that had been going on in the association, and prep them to make that vote for us to raise those assessments up.
Right. So it was sort of that, it has to be done, we gotta do it, but you gotta educate people as far as that goes. Amy, what about you? What did you learn from sort of your worst board meeting? If you don't want to recount the board meeting, that's fine, but it's
Well,
interesting here.
I've been to board meetings where we did have to have security, we did have to have police, and that is because emotions are high. And as a manager, I understand that. Residents are talking and concerned about where they live. So as a manager, I have to bring that detachment and that detached compassion. Is there such a thing? Compassionate detachment,
Sure.
where you go in and say, I understand the depth of your emotion about your own neighborhood, about how you are going to be living with your neighbors, but at the same time, this is a community, and we have to be careful about saying things in this forum that will persist after the meeting. So we are trying to be the professionals in the room, and that's our role as managers, is to make sure that people understand this is a business meeting and it needs to be conducted as a place of business where the board can productively make decisions. And there's going to be times when some residents are not going to be happy with those decisions. And then we have a process for addressing that, either elections to the board, or, you know, working through how the community operates, changing priorities, looking at all of the things that we have to look at. But the idea is we are there to help you build a community with your neighbors. And if there is contention and there is arguments that flare, you're going to go home and you're going to see that guy living across the street from you. You have to be able to work together, even at a board meeting, even as an HOA. You're going to have to be able to work together. And as a manager, my job is to help you get there. Again, in a detached but compassionate, professional way.
Yeah.
So I thought of my example. I should
Okay.
have thought of it quicker. It involved one of my staff being hospitalized. But no, the stress, her blood pressure went through the roof.
Oh my.
We had an owner that we kind of all knew and recognized was sort of one to provoke and agitate, stir the pot, and had a board meeting, had an owner forum, and this person availed themselves of that owner's forum and were really kind of doing the usual stir the pot. And I think this is where I go back to my don't address comments in an owner's forum, and also don't own the outcomes, don't own the decisions. And it wasn't necessarily us. I mean, the managers to be professional, but really so too is the board. And I think the lesson learned there was that I think Amy called it attached detachment, or I don't remember what was the phrase?
Compassionate detachment.
Yes, compassionate detachment. Because on some level, you will not have a fight if you don't match their volume. You will not have a fight if you let them have the last word. Now, that doesn't mean they actually won, but it just means that we're not going to keep talking about it. And if as they go louder, you go quieter. As they go more intense, you become more compassionately detached. It fundamentally changes the dynamic. And I know for board volunteers that have had these meetings, they come into those meetings and your emotions are all agitated, and that person is worn on your ever-loving nerve, you know, because you're volunteering all these hours, and then out of left field, this joker keeps throwing Molotov cocktails over the wall. And what I would tell you to do is, whenever I am in a public setting, whether it be as a public official or as a manager, I look for the person in the room that I don't know, who's maybe never been here before. And I process everything I do through what I imagine to be their eyes. And so I don't want them looking, they've never been to any of this. They don't know who any of us are. I want them to leave and think I am the most profoundly reasonable person in the room, and the rest of those jokers are the problem. And if you behave that way, you will be the most reasonable person. And you that is a tremendously helpful way to kind of manage your response to people who are trying to antagonize you.
I really like that. It's great advice. It is a challenge.
Oh yeah, I didn't say it was easy.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it really is worth it. Like you were saying, not matching their volume, not matching their intensity. It really, that'll help you not just in being a board member, but in just being a human being. That's something that I think is great advice for board members. So, any last words on during the meeting? Any last thoughts or comments, or things that you think are important to discuss?
I would like to just say, it's important when you have homeowners speaking to you or you've got the board speaking to you. I like to repeat back what I've heard to them and make sure I'm fully understanding the question or the comment, and then just be clear about what knowledge I have. And if I don't have knowledge, then say, I'm going to get back to you on that, and then actually follow up and not forget.
That's key as well. So I like that. Being able to communicate back to them what you've heard and to make sure that you're understanding. One of the 7 principles of I'm trying to remember his name,
Highly effective people.
Yes, there we go.
Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey, thank you. Seek first to be to understand, then to be understood. That's a highly effective habit. And so I think that's a really good example of that. Any other comments from Amy or from Joe on during the meeting?
Yeah, I have one, and that is that when people do come and their emotions are high, that both the board members and the manager need to remember it's not personal. They're upset about whatever they're upset about, whether it's the pothole, the weed, the pool hours, whatever. They're upset about that. And we are in a position to be problem solvers, but we cannot feel personally targeted. Even if they say this is about you, this is about how you're running things, we have to understand that their frustration does not need to be our frustration, that we are the people who have been asked to help solve the problem, and personalizing it is not helpful. So we have to be, again, calm and professional and understand not to take what they say personally right during that time.
And I would add to that, be sensitive to somebody who is quietly changing the subject on you. People who like to stir the pot as you move to get whatever their issue is resolved, change the terms of engagement on you and don't always tell you. And so a phrase that I have found helpful is, that's a different question. What we're talking about is what the pool hours should be. You know, the folks that kind of turn around, this is the worst board ever, and you all have been, you know, this is da 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 da. Well, that's a different question. What we're talking about right now is fill in the blank, because those folks, people who thrive on mayhem, have spent their life cultivating the talent to create mayhem, and you will not overcome them without some pretty deliberate strategy.
So that calm redirection, I think, is we have compassionate detachment and calm redirection. So we're coining some phrases here today.
And we should trademark them.
We should, we should. All right, great. So let's talk about after the meeting. After the meeting, I put down a couple of things. We had communication before, but what's the difference between communicating before and communicating after the meeting? Joni, why don't you start on this one?
Yeah. After the meeting, if the board gets their minutes, we can send out a meeting minute draft. Obviously, we can't post minutes until they're like approved. So we have to put draft on there if we're going to post them, but also a thank you letter goes out. I send a thank you letter out to the association. Thank you so much for everybody who attended the meeting. This is very productive. And then any announcements that we had from the meeting, I'll include that, and then just remind them of if it is a scheduled meeting where they have it, you know, regularly scheduled. I'll say, hey, this is the next meeting if you want to put those on your calendar. But just thanking the homeowners and the board for attending and any changes that have been made. I think it's always nice to send something like that out.
Great. And what can boards do as well to communicate, Amy? What can they do to kind of help that communication?
Well, I'm not sure that's the board member's role. I think that is really the manager's role. The board members first of all, okay, if you really want to know what the board members do, if there is a matter of contention and it was a split vote on something after the meeting, even the quote losing side unquote needs to get behind the decision of the board. So they can't, the board members cannot leave a meeting and then immediately go undermine the most recent decision making. And that happens, but that is not appropriate. Once the board has made a decision, the board as a group and through your membership on the board, you have to support the majority decision of the board. And you can't go off and try to find, you know, the fifth column and try to undermine what the board has done. So the board members who are not on the winning side, to the extent that they're upset, they're going to have to work through the system and not outside the system by rabble rousing, because the board has made a decision. After, and then in terms of what the manager does, yes, the minutes are supposed to be the tracking device for residents to understand what has happened at the board meeting. And so our job as managers is to make sure that they're clear, complete, concise, and posted as soon as possible, which is, of course, after they've been approved by the board. But that board meeting, again, it's the beginning and the end of a process. So as an end of the process, now I have my direction for the next period between meetings. And so I'm going to take the direction that I've received through motions and start implementing that as soon as I can appropriately do it. But I think that the key for me is that after a meeting where there's been a lot of argument, that the board members need to understand that whether you voted for that decision or not, as a member of a board that has made a decision, you need to support that decision.
And that's a tough thing too these days, because we hear people saying, you know, that's not my elected official because they disagree with some of their things, or that that's not my way of looking at things. And it's important for the board to get behind the rest of the board. I think that's a great point. Joe, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people hear what Amy just said, they may get hung up and but I still think that it was the wrong decision. You can still think it's the wrong decision. What you should not be doing is actively working, whether overtly or covertly, to undermine the decision of the board. Because when you do that, you ultimately negate the board forever and always in every decision it makes. And I've seen associations that play that game where they make a decision and then somebody goes home and they get told by whoever it is they live with, who's really doing the thinking for both of them, that the decision they made was wrong. And 72 hours after the meeting, the rest of the board and the manager and the client, the vendors don't know what the decision was because it's been thrown into chaos. Walking away from the meeting and agreeing that the decision was made does not mean you have to give up on what your thoughts and opinions were. It just means you respect the process and you don't undermine it, because if you undermine it, it is really hard to heal those rifts when that becomes part of an association's culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. An action items list too, I don't know if there's anything that you want to say about this, but when action items are assigned to different people, what's a good way for the board to follow up with those things and make sure that those things get done? I'll take anybody on this one.
Just at the bottom of my minutes, just there at the very bottom. And then I just keep in the email, like, okay, here's my action items, you know, and make sure that people are following up on them and just keeping them in the loop as they're getting completed.
Great.
Yeah, I think as the manager, that it's our job to make sure that action items are done. So that's my work orders, and so I report at the next meeting or through the month as things are accomplished.
Okay, great. I'd like to take some time now and answer questions that we've got a few minutes left. Answer questions from anybody in the audience. Jessica, do we have any questions that have
We
come
sure
through the chat?
do. We have quite a
Okay.
few. We've got some
Okay.
active stuff, so I'll run through those really quickly. So we have quite a few questions about agendas and the creation of those. So how detailed should an agenda be and who creates it?
I'll take that. So the agenda is, in my view, is best developed by the manager in consultation with the board president or vice, whoever's going to be running the next meeting, so that we can make sure that the action items that are bubbling up through the community are addressed. But there should also be some sense of an annual calendar, so that that if it's spring, it's time to make sure that the maintenance contract has been approved. If it's winter, you need to be sure that that we're all ready for snow removal. So there's some sort of an annual calendar that you're looking at in terms of making sure that your contracts and your services are where they need to be on the agenda, and also things that are coming up throughout the month or throughout the quarter, however often your meetings are held. So that's the agenda is developed with the manager working with the board leadership to make sure things are on track. Some things are going to be on there every time. Financial review, maybe you're getting ready for your audit. There's going to be things that are on there, month to month, but having some sense of where you are in the year, and then also what's happening through the month or through the quarter, so that you can address instant needs.
Great, thank you. How far in advance do you put out the agenda?
1 week.
Okay. Should every board meeting be open to community members?
Unless it's executive session, yes.
Agreed. And many states have laws about transparency and board meetings, so they should all be in compliance with the law.
And on that, a lot of states don't have laws that speak to HOAs specifically, but they often have sunshine laws that deal with other public bodies. And even though they aren't binding on an HOA, there is some merit in looking to them for guidance, because there's usually some sound rationale for why those meetings are handled that way. So even if it's not something you're required to do, it's not a bad thing to look to for inspiration.
Right.
Attach the agenda with the meeting notices that I'm sending out, the tentative agenda. And that's a good way to get homeowners to show up to the meetings, especially if you're discussing the budget or you're discussing some policy changes. Making sure that that's with your meeting announcement is going to help people show up.
Great. And do you have any recommendations for anything that you would do differently in a virtual meeting versus an in-person meeting? Like that environment and how, or is it all the same?
That's a tricky question. It's
Yeah.
not the same
It's
because
not.
you have a mute button in
Yeah.
a virtual meeting. And so I think here's my observations of virtual meetings compared to in person. Typically, we see less contention among residents because it's hard to get excited and yell at the board from your own living room in a virtual meeting. Whereas when they're coming to a library or a community center, they can get right up close and personal and be really loud and mad. But in a virtual meeting, the attitudes seem to be toned down a little bit. But at the same time, the board does have a way to mute people in a virtual meeting that they don't have in a community center in a real life meeting. So my counsel would be to not mute people without good cause, and or have a way for people to do that raise the hand thing so that they can still be heard to the extent the board is willing to do that.
Great. And I think someone mentioned it, but who's supposed to lead the meeting? Is it the manager? Is there a specific position on the board?
The chair usually leads the meeting, and that's usually the board president or some other officer, depending on who's there. But often that person will ask the manager to present the items for discussion.
I
So
think,
there's kind of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, Joe.
I think there's a way that the manager and the chair can kind of work in harmony with each other. I think ultimately the chair is presiding at the meeting, but the manager is probably the most conversant with the overall packet because they've worked with all the different parties to put it together. And so the way I normally see it done is the manager is sort of reading out the next item of business. You know, the board, the next item on the agenda is item 10.2, and that's review and consideration of the insurance renewal or whatever. And now that you've defined the question, now the board takes it up. That's the model I've seen be most successful.
I personally like the board to run the board meetings. When I get a board, I like to educate them and explain what their roles are, and then go through some mock board meetings so that they're comfortable presenting and they're comfortable with how the flow of the meeting goes. And I let them run their board. And I'm there for questions and comments. And if they want me to, I usually present financials. So they'll turn the time over to me for financials. But I think it's great to have the board running the board meetings because that shows the homeowners that the board is in control, not that the manager's in control. There is often a lot of confusion on who is in charge when the manager runs the meeting that I've had experience with. Where they're like, you know, they'll message us and ask us for things, and I'm like, we can't make those decisions. We follow the direction of the board. So for me, I want to educate the board so that they feel comfortable running the board meeting and they understand the financials and they understand the community as a whole.
All right, Jessica, any other questions?
We have a couple, there's some comments about trying to get Joe Wise's wording that he uses for homeowner forum and how to set those expectations, but I have copied all of the questions and we'll make sure in our follow-up communication that we answer any of those. They're very much along the same lines, but we want to make sure, I guess the one that we haven't answered is, do you send out meeting minutes or the recap to the owners? I know most of the time you post those to your owner portal if you have one. What is the process there?
Yeah, we post them to the portal once they're approved, or if the board has asked us to post in the portal as a draft. And that's where we find those, but.
Great. Well, awesome. I think, like I said, we'll answer any other questions in that email or directly with anyone who's reached out.
Right.
And I'm happy to share that language. I will send it to you, Darren and Jessica, and you can share it as you see fit.
Perfect. All right, we're out of time, and I think we could probably go for a lot longer, but we want to respect people's time. And thank you so much to our panelists, Joni, Joe, and Amy. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I really appreciate it. There's one thing I'd like to talk about before we close. We have an education scholarship that we are giving out to anybody that's a community member in any of your communities. It's a up to a $2,500 scholarship that's available. If you want more information about that, you can again take a picture of this code here and a QR code and have the person sign up for that. It does require like a little essay and that sort of thing, but it's something that can help out a lot of different people. Please remember that this AES series is for everyone, whether they are managed by our company or not. If you have a board member friend who is not even a managed board, this education is open to everyone. So please let your friends know, let people know that this is available for them and that it's a resource that can help them to manage their board meetings. So if you're a fan of AES, if you enjoy our meetings, please leave a 5-star review. We would appreciate that if you could leave us a review. It doesn't have to be 5 stars, but we like 5 stars. But whatever your feelings are about the AES series, we'd love to get a comment from you about it. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll see you on next time on our AES for Insurance 101, April 23rd. Thank you to all of you that have participated and given questions and that sort of thing. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next month. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.